Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being part of our security community. Just a couple of notices before we get started here. This call is being recorded, so please be aware of that. We will be posting the recording on our public tech community forums, which you can find under the link there, aka.mssecuritycommunity, if you would like to join, and we encourage that. If you have questions at any point, feel free to type them in the IM window, and then later on in the presentation, we'll unmute for everyone. And so if it's easier for any of you to ask those questions verbally. We're lucky today to have Johan Mollet introducing us to Microsoft Cloud App Security. He is part of the customer experience engineering team, which is our customer-facing part of the product team. Specifically, he's on the Get to Production team, which helps get everyone deployed and configured. So he's a great person to do this introduction and kind of dive into all these details for those of you who may be curious about it. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Johan.
Thank you, Ryan, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining that call. Just as Ryan mentioned, we're going to speak today about Microsoft Cloud App Security, and I'll try to give you an introduction of the product for those who are not familiar with it as of today. And I understand every one of you already owns that product through your licensing model, and you would be able to deploy it and leverage it very quickly. And our team is also here to help you through that deployment, but I'll get to that towards the end of our discussion today. That's our agenda for this call today, and let's get started directly with a quick overview of what are cloud access security brokers. So as all of you probably know, most companies are now using applications in the cloud. You can see some of the examples here, and these can be very difficult to secure. The idea is that a lot of applications are sometimes not sanctioned by the organization, or sometimes the IT organization is not even aware that those applications are here. So we're trying to help you not only discover what is in use, but also secure what you already know and what you actually sanction. And so the top use for what we call a CASB can be seen in 3 steps here. So first of all, finding out what unsanctioned apps you're using. For example, how many users are using a public version of Dropbox, or sharing data on YouTube or Facebook, or things like that. You really want to know about these things, obviously. The second part is managing your sanctioned apps. So great, you're using Salesforce, but are you sure that the data in Salesforce is securely configured? Is it securely shared? These are the kind of things that you also want to have visibility on, and you want to be able to take control on what is happening and what your users are doing here. And finally, cloud threats. So cloud threats is very typical and can apply to basically any kind of applications. It's now it's a very sensitive topic, as most applications can be victim of that. And of course, you didn't expect anything else from me. We're going to talk about our own CASB, Microsoft Cloud App Security. So here, there's a quick diagram of how the architecture of Cloud App Security is conceived and how it works. And the idea is that we'll start our discussion here by discovery. And discovery means trying to find out what applications are used in your environment. Not necessarily which one you decide to use, but which one your users are deciding to use. So for that, we need to find out what's happening and what's being sent through the network. So we use your firewall logs, or now we can also integrate with Windows Defender ATP. I'll get to that, to make sure that we understand which applications your users are leveraging, how risky they are, etc. So that's the source of data number 1. That's what we use to find more information about your applications. We also have the ability to connect some applications through an application connector. Those app connectors use the APIs provided by the vendors, such as Box, Dropbox, obviously Office 365, and a few others. And that gives us a very deep integration with those apps. Again, I'll get to the details. And finally, we have a reverse proxy capability. Through this reverse proxy capability, we're able to, that's what we call conditional access app control, and we're able to intercept directly the traffic to your app and provide a real-time control. Some of the applications that we can actually have some integration with, whether it's through reverse proxy or through API connector, you would find them here on the left side. And a few customer references that we have here. We have some case studies available on our website, customers.microsoft.com. And so getting a little deeper in cloud app security, we're going to talk about discovery of shadow IT. And the way cloud app security works is that it has a catalog of 16,000 cloud applications and service that we keep extending. You can even add custom apps if you know of any that we are not referencing here, or you can let us know and we will reference them. And the idea is that for each of those apps, we're assessing the risk across 70 risk factors. And some of them can be some security features of the app. Some of them can be some certification or industry standards such as GDPR or HIPAA, things like that. And based on all of that, we're calculating a risk score for each of those apps. So each of those 16,000 apps that we have, you will be able to see which one your users are leveraging and what's the risk score for those applications. And then based on that, you can also understand what are the usage patterns. You can see if there's a lot of traffic to a certain app or what kind of app categories are currently being used more than others in your environment. And the beauty of that is that you can then take control of the environment, and you can decide that you want to unsanction or sanction some applications. The applications that are unsanctioned can then be blocked. You can block them either by configuring some export script and blocking script to your firewall, or we have some native integration with some firewalls such as Zscaler that you could leverage here as well. Very quick idea of the infrastructure and how it's architected here. So you will see that there are your endpoints, and they're obviously trying to reach out to some applications in the cloud. So they will usually go through your firewall, and we will configure your firewall to integrate with our log collector. It can receive data through either FTP or syslog, and what it needs is basically the firewall logs. And from that, it will send the firewall logs to Cloud App Security, and Cloud App Security will have a very good idea of what's happening in your environment. Now, your question is going to be, how do we deal with endpoints that are not in our network? And for that, we have another solution, which is integration with Windows Defender ATP. And from there, we can gather the same kind of data that we have on firewall logs, and we're able to have discovery data, find out what your users are doing on the cloud, wherever they are, on-prem or basically outside of your organization as mobile users. Another integration we have is with Zscalers, and we'll have other cloud firewalls and gateways that will be integrated in the near future. But so far we're integrating with Zscaler, and by linking Zscaler and Cloud App Security, you are able to have this discovery configuration without adding any software in your environment. And data is sent directly from Zscaler to Cloud App Security, which makes it fairly easy. And it makes it also very easy to actually simply block traffic to applications that you wish to unsanction. And with no further ado, we'll have a quick demo. So I'll start with demonstrating the discovery feature, obviously, and this is our general dashboard. We'll get to that soon. But for now, let's click on Discovery. Let's click on the dashboard. And you can see really quickly here, with simple glance, the number of applications that we're discovering in your environment, the number of IP addresses, users, and the amount of traffic. You can also see very quickly the traffic that has low risk, medium risk, or high risk based on the type of application. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see the type of the exact applications that are leveraged right now. So we can see that there's a lot of traffic going to Google Drive. So either you're using Google Drive as a sanctioned application in your environment, Or maybe this is some kind of shadow IT, somebody using it to store his corporate data, which they shouldn't do. So we'll investigate that. You can also see here the top users, and we have our friend Johnny here that has a lot of traffic compared to his colleagues. You can also see where the applications are located. So if you have applications that are located in a risky country, it is also something you want to monitor extra carefully. Right now, let's do this very simply. We see that Google Drive has a lot of traffic. We want to know what's the reason and who is actually using that. So we're clicking, and very simply, the page for Google Drive will show up. And you can see right away, Google has a certain number of active users, IP addresses. You can see the traffic that is uploaded and the traffic that is downloaded. That gives you an extra level of intelligence or information here to know that, okay, data is sent to Google. Maybe it's somebody trying to exfiltrate data simply because he was fired or he's about to leave or something like that. So let's see who are these people. By clicking on users, you'll have a list that will show up, and we can filter and sort by uploaded traffic. Is it something that is all over the board, or is it something that have one specific user? Right now, it doesn't look like there is. Let me filter that. So it seems that for this application, the traffic would be. My apologies. We're going to filter the other way. No. So for here, we can see that which users are leveraging the application, and you can very quickly see our friend Johnny here. Johnny is using 112 gigs of traffic. He has the most transactions, so that's basically almost everything. So if we want to pivot, we can just pivot in there and see what Johnny is doing. And we won't have access to his exact files. This is all encrypted, and this would be a privacy issue. But we can see that he's been uploading a lot of data constantly, and there's a little peak here about a month ago. So probably Johnny was quitting the company and exfiltrating his traffic, or you were just starting using Google Drive in your company. In that case, that would be another opportunity. And we can see which other application Johnny is using, and if there are any that also would show the same kind of pattern of exfiltrating data. And you can see only one cloud application actually. So that's probably a cloud storage application. So that's probably the only application he was using for that kind of things. So now if you want to be alerted for this type of application, of activity, you can definitely do that. So you can create a policy and what we call an app discovery policy here, and simply say I want to be alerted if somebody is using a new app and this app has a high upload. So there are templates for that you can simply use, and you would be able to trigger a policy if somebody uploads more than, let's say, 500 megs on the same day, something that would be a new app, of course. And then you would be able to decide what kind of action you want to take. Here it would be sending an alert or tagging the app as sanctioned or unsanctioned as you wish. So that's the kind of things you can have for discovery, and it gives you a good idea of what's happening in your environments and being able to take control over that. I'll show you one last thing, but we want to see what kind of risk we get here, what kind of risk we're able to see. So I'm just deciding to click on the risky apps that your users are leveraging, or our user in that test environment, of course. And you will see these will be apps with a risk score of 3 or less. And the type of information we get for those apps can be very interesting. Let's click on one. If anybody is familiar with this one, I'm personally not. But we will learn about it thanks to this page. You can see the number of users for this app, etc. But what we really care about here is going to be the information tab. Because this information tab will give you a lot of information about the app itself and why do we consider it to be a security risk. It will tell us information about what type of security settings they're configuring or leveraging or allowing, and also about compliance and legal issues. So if we look at general settings, it seems like an average app. It seems like in terms of security, they're offering some decent security settings. Not necessarily all of them. This is why they're not a 10. But then you can see that in terms of compliance, they're not offering much as of now. So we're classifying them with a lower score, a higher risk, and that's the kind of applications you want to be careful about. If you see that there's a high amount of upload to this kind of apps, you would want to be able to know about it, and you could create an alert that will let you know. And that's for our first demo. I trust that if you have any questions, please type them in the chat window, and some of my colleagues will be able to respond during the discussion. Otherwise, we'll definitely open it for more questions after this presentation. Next part of cloud app security is protecting your data. So you have data that you know and that you own, and you want to make sure that it's protected. And sharing it in the cloud, using it in the cloud simply sometimes add another risk. So the Microsoft information protection story is much bigger than cloud app security, but today we will obviously focus on cloud app security for the sake of time, and storing your data in the cloud more in general. So first of all, what we want to do when you start working with cloud app security is understand what kind of data you have in the cloud and seeing the kind of exposure you have for your data in the cloud. So the first thing you will want to do is use those API connectors to connect to your sanctioned and well-known cloud applications. Those applications are Office 365, Salesforce, Box, Dropbox. You would also have ServiceNow, Amazon Web Service, of course, Azure. I'm probably missing Okta as well. So you could configure those applications through the API connectors so that you would be able to have a good visualization, a good visibility on what is shared on those cloud applications. Then you can decide how you want to protect them. So if you see that you have data that is confidential, let's imagine PII. You're having data storing social security numbers that is stored on your cloud, and you want to make sure that if this happens, you want, first of all, a notification, and you want to automatically protect the data. So that's something you could do. You could configure a policy, and you will have some pattern match in the file, some DLP policies, to verify that your file contains social security numbers, or it could be credit card numbers, or basically a lot of different type of patterns that we have, or a custom one if you want. And you will be able to automatically apply an AIP policy, for example, an AIP classification label. And if it's something that you don't wish to leverage, you could simply move the file to a quarantine location. That's also another possibility. Or just simply notify the user and tell them, listen, you're doing something that is against corporate policy. Please remove that file from your cloud drive. And that's something that you will be able to do and will help you have more control over your data here. And the type of data you're able to analyze, to check in your files is very, very wide. So we use a service called Data Classification Service that is shared among different Microsoft products, and that allows you to find out this type of patterns in your files. So here we can see a few examples, but there are 90 types that are pre-configured here. And you could definitely add your own if it is something that you wish. So all the basics are here: social security, credit card number. We can see ABA routing number, or a few Australian ones, because we're obviously checking the first page with the A's here. But you can make a search on this, and that will help you find out what kind of data is happening in your environment, and create policies based on that. And so a quick demo here for information protection. I'm going to show you how to create those policies. And I'll show you the type of alerts you get with these. So this is the policy page. I was there very briefly. And if I click on Create Policy, you can see that there are different type of policies. So earlier we created an app discovery policy because we were talking about discovery. Right now we're talking about DLP, and we're talking about information protection. So we will create a file policy to find out what is happening in your files. And we'll simply use a template for the sake of the demo, just to make it simple. But let's imagine we have PII shared in the cloud. So by default, it will give you a simple match on social security number, but let's show a little bit more of these. And we're able to choose, obviously, much more information type. And let's say we care about ABA number, and we also care about credit card number. So we're adding this. And we're also adding ABA. Okay, so we'll just click on Done. And right now, let's start with the ABA, for example. You're able to choose and say, I want to have an accuracy match between 75 and 100%, and no need to track files that contain only one of such bank account numbers, but maybe at least 5. And this way, you know that if somebody is tracking this, it's not just his own ABA number on his personal file and he's taking only a personal risk, but he has more than one. It's probably customer data, so you want to be careful about that. You can have other type of filters based on that. You can say, I'm only interested in filtering files that are on certain collaborators. For example, you can say only certain very critical users that have customer interactions. For the other ones, I would assume it's just personal. So you could do this kind of things to avoid, to limit the scope of your policies, and that would be obviously your own decision. But it's just to show you that this type of policies are very, very flexible and customizable here. And then once you do that, for all the apps that you're using, you can define governance actions. So I'll give you an example for a start with Microsoft OneDrive for Business. You could decide to make the file private, imagining it is shared remotely, or you could decide to put the file in some kind of quarantine. Or my favorite feature is apply classification label. Why is it my favorite feature? Simply because it doesn't bother the user, it doesn't prevent them from doing their work, but it adds some level of protection. So that if the file goes into the wrong hands, because let's say somebody does something wrong and his cloud account becomes compromised, then the files have an extra level of protection. And that will help those files not being shared externally so easily. So this is the type of things you could do. Other type of policies, you could also create policies when files are shared externally, for example, and if they contain special data and they're shared externally, you would trigger the policy at this time. It would be up to you. And last thing here you want to see in terms of governance, you can see that we're not very focused on only Microsoft, but if you look at other vendors, we do have additional governance actions. So we're trying to be technology agnostic here, and whatever cloud storage solution you're using, you should have very similar possibilities, obviously depending on the APIs that those vendors provide. For example, on Salesforce, you will have less. On Dropbox, you will have a little less. But on SharePoint, on Box, on Google, you will have a lot of capabilities. And that's what we're trying to focus on. Okay, next part of our discussion will be now around real-time monitoring and controls. We introduced a few months back a beautiful feature called conditional access app control. And the idea of conditional access app control is to help you with having a real-time control over your environment and over the traffic that goes through some of your applications. So you could decide that you have some applications that will have that you will want to monitor in real time. And for that, we will simply intercept all of the traffic and decide what goes through and what doesn't, as simply as that. So in those cases, you could decide that you want to block download here for a sensitive file, and you would be able to not only to send a message to the user telling them you're connecting from a non-corporate device or non-compliant device, you cannot download this file. And if you don't want to go so restrictively, you could even do something that is even nicer, which is protecting the file on the fly. So let's we'll show some integration scenario in a few seconds, but that's the idea here. You will be able to protect or block files on the fly. This will integrate with Azure Active Directory, with the ability to make sure that we have our users that are stored in Azure AD and those apps as well. So the integration becomes very simple. I'll give you a quick use case. Let's imagine a user that has a Box account, for example. We're talking corporate Box account here. And you want to prevent the data that is stored on his Box account, if it is sensitive data, to be downloaded on a non-compliant device. So let's imagine our user John here is connecting from a hotel device. His machine seems okay, but it's an unmanaged device. Maybe it's Windows, maybe it's fully patched, but let's say he's in a hotel right now and his corporate laptop just died for any reason. He's connecting from a public device. You assume that from an unmanaged device there is a certain level of risk in the session, and you're going to only allow partial download. So if it's a non-sensitive file, then it's fine. We'll inspect it, see that it's not sensitive. We'll let the user download it and do what he has to do with it. Now for the sensitive file, we can say no. This data is too sensitive. We will not allow download. We can allow viewing online, but we will not allow download or protect it on download, which means that on the fly, while the user is downloading it, we will prevent them from. We will make sure that the file is protected using AIP. So that's a protection that MCAS will add on the fly, so that let's imagine he forgets it on the desktop of his public computer in the hotel. Not a problem. The file is protected. There's an extra layer of security here, and nobody else will be able to read the file. I'll show you the interface very simply on how to create this type of policies. But you can here quickly create session policies. Type a name, decide that it's, let's say, a control policy. We're going to control the files that are, we're going to protect the files that are downloaded here. And we can trigger that, we can have some type of activity here that we're configuring. So in our case, we're saying that if a device is not compliant or non-domain join. We could also have client certificate in some cases if that works better for you. And we can select some specific apps. So in our case, let's say Box, because that's what we took as our example. And then you can add additional filters. You can have some inspections. So right now, let's simply say that we will, again, go with our ABA number. And if somebody tries to download a file that has more than 5 ABA numbers, we can decide to test, just monitor, block it, or protect the file. So protect, as I told you, is a very cool feature just because it doesn't prevent the user from working, but it allows them to simply work with a protected file. And if he's he's using a file type that is not supported with this type of protection, you can decide, okay, in that case, you will just block it. And, maybe not, or maybe not notify the user. That would be up to you. And then you can decide to create an alert so that you would know this type of activity happened. If it's something that you expect to be common, you do not have to create an alert and bother your SOC to see that. So that's the type of cool policies you could do, and that could help you to have some real-time control over what's happening in your environments. And next topic is about protection from cyber threats. This is also something that is very critical. We want to make sure that customers who are using cloud applications have some strong protection, or at least strong level of detection of risks that are happening to their apps. No need to spend a lot of time on which type of threats you guys are facing, because you know them all too well. It could be a malicious insider, somebody who is trying to make a mess before he gets fired, or it could be a simple malware, as we have seen on a lot of cases. Ransomware, I don't think there's a need to discuss that anymore. You know what it's about. Some rogue applications in some cases, such as what we call OAuth apps. I will get to that in a second. Data exfiltration is a major issue, and based on the data we get in discovery, that's something we're trying to help you with. And compromised accounts, for example, we're checking a number of things that will let us know if an account is compromised or not, such as impossible travel or a few other things that we can discuss here. Actually, this is a good list of the type of things we're detecting. So you can see the different types of detection. That when we talk about threat delivery and persistence, we think about malware, we think about malicious OAuth apps. OAuth apps are, those applications that will ask you, do you want to allow us to view your profile and your email and your data, your stored data in the cloud, things like that. So these will request permissions to some of your users' accounts. And in some cases, they're simply malicious. So we're trying to detect that as well. Multiple failed logon to an app, for example, or suspicious inbox rules. That's for Office 365, for example, if somebody is trying to exfiltrate data through that. We also have the ability to detect things such as anonymous IP addresses through, for example, Tor or things like that. And activity from infrequent countries or impossible travel sessions that we can see in the environment. So if somebody is usually working in the US and tomorrow you see him in Zimbabwe, you may wonder if there is something that is off here. And same thing, if within the same time frame somebody is working from France and from Russia, it's also something that is very suspicious. We also check for unusual file download activity, for example, or ransomware activity. So all of these are based on heuristics. For unusual file download, for example, it would be somebody who is not usually doing this kind of thing, but downloading 400 megs at the same time. That could be an example, and that should trigger the policy. Or ransomware activity would be based on literally based on heuristics and how files could be changed and replaced by others in a short time frame. That would be typical of a ransomware, and we would be able to tell you if the data in your cloud is targeted by ransomware. Usually what would happen is, of course, the data is synced on the client, and the ransomware is impacting the client or several clients in your environments, which would then be shown in the cloud, and that would trigger an automatic alert, and you could act upon it very quickly. And I'll show you some of the quick the policies that we have in the environment. And a few things that you want to know about these is that, first of all, you don't have to do a lot. If I select the type of policies here that are related to threat detection, you can see that you would have, so you would have a lot of policies here that are based on anomaly or here to help you by default. Those are configured as soon as you enable your MCAS tenant, and they're very simple to leverage. You basically have nothing to do. You would just have activity from infrequent country showing up when there is something that seems off or something that is not usual. Same for ransomware activity. Doesn't cost you anything. As soon as you have MCAS enabled, this will kick in. So all of these policies are very useful, and they will help you just by simply enabling the product. If you have more than one cloud storage provider, for example, or cloud applications that you can integrate with MCAS, they will all be protected as soon as you connect them. So connecting those applications is usually fairly simple. You just have to put the username and they will be connected. Some of them require extra configuration depending on the vendor of the app. But as soon as you are able to connect them, you will have this level of protection, and you basically have nothing else to do. If you have specific threats that are very specific to your environment, and you would be also able to create some activity policies, and those activity policies would just be customizable to anything you would like. So if you want to have some type of repeated activities, you would be able to configure some very flexible policies. A couple more things in terms of malware detection. So I talked about OAuth apps. These are the applications that, as I said, will request permissions to a number of your applications. So you are now able to detect them, and we're able to, thanks to Cloud App Security, take actions. You could simply decide that if an application is from a specific vendor that you do not trust, you will simply revoke the application. And this way, it will not have a lot of access to your environment, just like it would have, or based on the risk of the application. So that's the type of things you could do, and those applications where you're able to detect them very simply with just configuring those API connectors that we discussed earlier. As you can see, some of them are here. We also have, so when it comes to malware detection, we also have the ability to detect the malware files that are shared or stored in the cloud. And you just need to enable the policy. The policy is there by default. It's disabled by default, but you just need to enable it. And automatically, you'll have some malware detection in your cloud applications. Whether it's Office or Dropbox or G Drive, works the same. You will have this type of detection very simply. Another interesting part when it comes to threat detection is CASB for your cloud platform. When we talk about cloud platform, we're talking about either Azure or AWS. So we're able to identify anomalies in your cloud environment, mostly around your users, your IP addresses, things such as impossible travel or unusual location will be detected for no matter what type of application you're using, whether it's a storage or whether it's Azure or AWS. These threat detection policies will just apply very simply by just connecting the apps. When it comes to Azure, we also have a nice integration with Azure Security Center, and we're able to see directly from Cloud App Security the type of recommendations that Azure Security Center makes for your environment. So you would see them directly from there, and that gives you kind of a single pane of glass. And a quick summary and the next steps here. So first of all, if you don't have Cloud App Security, you can sign up for it. I'm pretty sure from my understanding that most of you already own licenses to Cloud App Security. And so if you don't have it yet, or if you have not done it yet, you can just connect to the portal.cloudappsecurity.com, simply enable it, and you will be able to connect Office 365 for a start. And within a few minutes, you already have the threat detection enabled. So that's usually what I would recommend. And then you can, of course, configure more of the features of the product, such as shadow IT, such as configuring additional cloud apps, and also configuring real-time protections. And for all of that, we're also happy to assist you. Right after this meeting, I will send an email to all those who signed up, making sure that we will also send you at this time a sign-up link for additional assistance. So if you already have the product, and if you have additional questions on how to deploy it, on how to make sure that you can take your use case and translate it into something that is actionable on the product, we will be here and available to help you. So you will receive that email in the next few minutes after this meeting, and we will be happy, myself and my team, to provide you some extra assistance. Obviously, we will the time for assistance will be on a first come first serve basis, but we will respond to all the requests. And with no further ado, we will just open it for questions.
All right, everyone, I've gone ahead and unmuted the audience, so feel free to ask any questions verbally, or if you're more comfortable with it in the IM window. Either way is fine.
And we're happy to hear any questions you guys may have. If they're very specific to your environment, of course, we'll be happy to take it offline. But if you have more general questions on cloud app security, please let us know. I noticed that there were a few messages in the IM window, so I assume there were a lot of questions when I was speaking. Please let us know if you have any additional points that you would like to discuss. Feel free to type them if you prefer. Okay, we'll stay here for a few minutes. If there are any additional questions, we'll be happy to take them and discuss them.
For those of you who might have any questions or anything you want to discuss that you don't want to do on this call, please, as the links there say, we'd love to have you join our community. I'll paste the link also so it's easy for people to click on. That's a place where we're going to be announcing future additional calls like this, some of which will deep dive on various topics. And it's just a general place where all of us are to respond and to any of your questions or any discussions you'd like.
So we have a question here. Is there a method to add ADFS as part of discovery to MCAS? So what exactly would you like to discover? You can speak or type.
Well, I'm just wondering if we can kind of monitor what's going on with the federated services when people are logging into other apps instead of going through the firewall to gather the data.
So it's a good question. We don't integrate with ADFS. If you have some type of a single sign-on using Azure AD, you would have a bit more visibility here, but that would be only for your apps that are within your environment, not necessarily apps that would be not sanctioned apps. For that, we have the discovery part. So the discovery part would be either based on your firewall logs or based on Windows Defender ATP and what traffic it intercepts on the client. We have a second question. Are there any comparison document between CAS and other external CAS providers like SkyHigh and Netscope? Excellent question. For that, I would invite you to reach out to us directly if if you have pinpoints with or questions about some of the capabilities that we have compared to competitors. We're happy to discuss them with you. We do not have a document ready and shareable with that respect. But if you have things that you see on our products and you're wondering how to do these with our product, we're very happy to entertain that discussion and guide you through that.
Hi, guys. Hello?
Hey,
Yes,
James.
hello?
Oh, hi. A question about the connection preferences. You were talking about integrating with the firewall logs and then exporting those either FTP or I forget the other method that you had said. Syslog, got you. So would that be a syslog relay from internal to the cloud, or is that a secure connection up there, or would it just be easier to integrate that with our ATP features?
If you guys are using Windows Defender ATP, that's the best thing because it's a one-click configuration, literally. So that's what I would usually recommend. If you're not using Windows Defender ATP internally, what you have to do is simply configure a log collector. So the log collector will be on a machine on-prem and will be receiving data from your firewall. So you have to configure your firewall so that it sends the data directly to cloud.
Oh, yeah, we have a syslog server. Yeah, we have a syslog server that just is a repository. So.
Okay, so you're sending already your firewall data to your syslog server. You would like to send it from your syslog server.
Well, as an option, but if it integrates with ATP, seamlessly, then I don't see a reason to export our entire syslog on a daily or nightly basis. So.
On your case, it's probably the best thing. For customers who don't have Windows Defender ATP, the log collector is the option.
Got it.
And
Thank
Defender,
you.
just like Gershon is mentioning on the chat, Defender ATP gives you data on-prem and off-prem, which you would not get from your firewall. You would get only on-prem, of course.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Another question from Jason. Can we take the data that you are creating with MCAS and pipe it to a SIM via syslog? Yes, you can. So you can define what you want to send to syslog, either just the alerts that you configure or basically any activity. Any activity would be basically any kind of logon or file creation or even file download that happens to any of the cloud applications that are connected with MCAS. But if you want just the alerts because it's too much traffic, go ahead, you can have just the alerts. And you can even configure, you can have more filters in terms of what you want to send to the syslog, but that's a conversation we can have offline. But the response is yes, you can send data to a SIM, whichever it is. If you try to, okay, sorry, it was not a question, it was a response here. Excellent. We have booked for more time, so we're very happy to cover any additional questions that you have today.
So as a requirement, then it's basically minimum is 1809 then.
Yes, that was just released. I understand it may take some time for you to upgrade your clients, but any further version will also support it, obviously.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So we're staying in for any additional question. Please feel free. And right after this call, as I mentioned, we will send you a quick link if you would like to sign up for assistance on our side. And you will be able to mention what type of assistance you require and what type of knowledge you already had of the product, and how we can assist you with making the best use of cloud app security.
All right, last call for any additional questions. Feel free to either type them or ask them verbally. All right, if we've got nothing else, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Johan, for a fascinating presentation, and thank you to all of us who joined us and for being part of our security community.
Thank you all. Have a great day, and looking forward to working with you.